Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargava, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show.
India is currently home to nearly 8% of the world's known plant and animal species. The country harbors over 3,500 species of fish, over 400 amphibians, over 700 reptiles, over 1,300 bird species, and more than 400 mammals. A remarkable range that only a handful of countries can claim. Now, as many of you know, a significant number of these species are also under threat. Land and sea use changes, pollution, climate change, and habitat destruction continue to put immense pressure on them. And while many of these challenges are often weighed against the need for development and livelihoods, one threat stands out, driven almost entirely by profit and greed. This is the illegal practice of poaching, which continues to be widespread in the country.
Poaching is quite prevalent in the sense you have all the rules and all the agencies in place, but just like you have the police forces, but crime do take place. So it is absolutely impossible to reach a situation when you have a poaching-proof mechanism. So it will always happen.
That's the Indian Express's Jay Mazoomdaar, who reports on wildlife for the paper.
And if you go back in the past, we have data when these things first came to light in the 90s. So from the mid-90s to the 10 years, the first 10 years, when the Sariska thing happened and it got to international limelight. During those years, and in those 10 years, many agencies used to collect data.
The Sariska incident Jay refers to here took place in the early 2000s, when it was discovered that not a single tiger remained in the Sariska National Park, primarily due to rampant poaching.
So I remember 1994 to 2003, about 10 years, they had documented 684 tigers poached. So that would be about 70 tigers a year on an average, and some 2,300 leopards. So 230 leopards per year. So this was that prevalent. So after Sariska, there was some shock, surprise reaction also. The government said that they would take the opportunity for reforms. So then there was a sense that for a period that everybody is on high alert, so the numbers would naturally go down.
But this did not happen. A few years later, in 2013, more poaching cases came to light in Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. And even just a few years ago, many of you might remember India celebrating the success of its growing tiger population, a story that made headlines around the world.
India's wild tiger population continues to rise, a good sign for the endangered species.
Between 2006 and 2018, the population almost doubled to nearly 3,000. Now it's well over 3,000. The country is now home to more than 75% of the world's tigers.
The results of the just declared tiger census would make every Indian, every nature lover happy.
And it was this kind of news we now learn that followed another vicious cycle of tiger poaching.
See, the moment you have this good news, and this good news come from time to time, which also sends a signal, so to speak, to the poachers that now there are easy pickings. And because, as I said, there is a periodicity, so you can imagine like when a big racket is busted, naturally there would be a lull in poaching, so the tigers recover. And then again, when you get good numbers, probably it's human nature, we become complacent a bit, and then the poachers strike again. So that's why this 10-year cycle we see.
Now, in his recent investigation for the Indian Express, Jay uncovered that tiger poaching in the country has been on a steady rise. So we are dedicating this episode to discussing some of the key highlights from his investigation. Currently, investigators from 5 states, 4 central agencies and Interpol are tracking multiple poaching networks in the country. In fact, this year alone, over a dozen arrests were made. And officials say that these networks have poached at least 100 tigers since 2022.
And also the scary bit is the standard thumb rule is that in any kind of enforcement, be it drugs or wildlife contraband, you only catch about 10 to 15%. Even if I be liberal and say 25% is caught, then the scale is really mind-blowing. And one would wonder where they're coming from. I mean, Do they have so many even? So this is there, the threat perception and what is actually happening. And I would like to add here that in this discussion, we will cover as much as you can of the stories, but these are 3 stories in quite extensive detail. So I would encourage your listeners to read those. And here we will cover some of it and put some perspective in the sense that why these issues are what they are. So first thing is that this is an investigation, ongoing investigations we are talking about. The context is that, unfortunately, whenever poaching rackets came to light, first of all, they don't come to light. They function with impunity for a long period. And even when they come to light, there is a tendency, I won't name agencies or states, there is a historical tendency to cut the damage in the sense that they don't want to own up.
Basically, anytime poaching cases come to light, the concerned government agencies always try to underplay it.
And this investigation's context is exactly that. We wanted to highlight the extent of damage, and which I'm not sure which otherwise would be adequately owned up.
Though Jay says that what's really scary is that we don't actually know the extent to which tiger poaching is happening right now. We earlier mentioned that at least 100 tigers have been poached since 2022, but that is a very, very conservative estimate.
And to give a proper perspective, historically, because the tiger market, so-called market, is always China, because many may not be aware that from tiger product, we understand tiger skin. Tiger skin is not the prime tiger product. Main tiger product is tiger bones. In India, for example, there is no demand for tiger bone, no use. And in the global West, USA and the European countries, barely any demand for tiger bone. There it is primarily the pelt. Because earlier also, when we didn't call it poaching, we called it hunting. So that was for the trophy, the tiger skin on your wall. And that was not done by tribal poachers. That was done by the Maharajas and the Brits.
But he says a shift happened in the 80s and the 90s, where the tiger bone in powdered form began being sold for consumption.
As many things, I mean, like a magic cure. They are also put in the wine vats to mature the wine with the tiger bones. And then more recently, it is being used as a kind of a gelatinous cake by slow stewing. So why they are doing this? Because getting tiger bone is not always easy outside China, because you need a proper facility, which is illegal. So if you can infuse tiger bone into a wine, that becomes tiger wine. If you can't do that, so you make that cake by slow stewing the bone, and then you add that cake to any wine and drink it, so it becomes kind of a tiger wine. So tiger bone was in demand, and this was primarily what is driving the trade in India, because the Chinese wanted the bones, and like in everything, as you would always prefer a country chicken to a poultry chicken, so the Chinese farms were not good enough, so they wanted bones from the wild tigers, and wild tigers were always in India. Even 30 years back, 50% of the world's wild tigers were here. Now with the growth in numbers, you can say we have more than 70% of the world's wild tigers. So that was the first driver. And then bone is there, then there is demand for the whiskers, every part, I mean, like claws. Even many fancy Chinese restaurants, they serve you a tiger penis soup.
Wait, you're saying that in China they would openly serve it in restaurants for people to eat?
Yeah, they would. And over time, the Chinese governments have cracked down. Many of these facilities have been banned, but it's a big country and things work at many levels. So until recently, they used to have a customized menu for that, because it is not easy to source a Chinese tiger penis. And so you can stew it only that many times. So with every stew, the price would go down. So the so-called first flash of soup is the costliest. After 6 or 7 rounds, it would be sold at some price, whoever. So what I'm trying to say is that when you have this kind of conviction, which has no scientific basis, obviously, then every bit of it is of some commercial value. So the tribal poachers earlier here, and 20 years back, when I was looking into these gangs, they would get 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs for their entire lives work probably. And for one tiger, if they would get 70, 80,000, it would be fine. Sometimes they'd be lucky, they would get more than a lakh. From there, it has come to now 8 to 12 lakh per tiger. So in, say, 20 years. So that's the growth.
And Jay, the other thing you write in your piece is that the preferred routes to export these things have changed. Talk about what has been the traditional route and what is being used now.
Yeah, because as I said, the demand was primarily from China. So the poachers took the shortest route. The traders would take them to Nepal and then to Tibet via Lhasa to China. So that was the standard route. From whichever part of the country they would hunt, south, west, central, north, obviously. And the other route, which is the Myanmar route, which was always for rhino horn, because it's there, Kaziranga is there, and some opportunistic hunting of tigers would happen. So those tigers would also go in that route. But only now, in the last few years, this is a new discovery that even tigers from the so-called mainland, they're also going via the Myanmar route. The northern tigers, like in Uttarakhand, North Bihar, UP, some of it is still going via Nepal, but this shift has happened through the Myanmar border, which is very active for quite a few years, not only because of tiger trade, they're also getting other contraband. So there is quite a, I would say, the most active smuggling channel is now through Myanmar.
Okay, so one thing you mentioned earlier was that, the really scary part is that we don't actually know the extent to which this is happening. But right now, you have all these authorities investigating the matter. What do their reports reveal about this?
So two things. One is that the investigation that we have done, the information that we have gathered, we haven't published everything because the probe is ongoing, so we can't compromise that. And also, there are many aspects we learned which are not being looked into now. We hope that those will be looked into soon. So to put it simply, there is one channel through Nepal, and we don't know at all how much is going through there right now. So my story, the investigations that's happening, they're not touching that. So that's we don't know about. Then the Myanmar channel, and there are multiple strands that is operating through that channel. This investigation has so far cracked only one strand, and only one strand has showed up transaction of 7.5 to 8 CR, and at 8 to 12 lakh per tiger, that would be up to 60 to 90 tigers. So if you have two broad channels, one you don't know about, the other, only one fraction of that is accounting for 60 to 90 tigers. So I think the figure that we have put in our story, that 100 to anything, that 100 is a very conservative figure.
And right now you have forest officials of Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh, and of course the Centre's Wildlife Control Bureau, the WCCB, investigating this matter. How concerned are they about this?
They are concerned, there is no doubt about that, and there is a welcome sign this time that they are not entirely stonewalling the fact that there have been heavy losses. But still, the way the government agencies work, some are more defensive than the rest. So the first tendency is to own up the least possible and not get away with it. And then I'm sure they will do what they need to do. But to accept damage that this has gone, it's hard for any in a government system.
Yeah, and especially considering it's the national animal.
Yeah. See, we have a very strange reaction to the tiger reality. You will see many stories come out which says that 20 tigers reported dead in a certain place. So that in itself means nothing. I mean, tigers are not immortal. So those things will happen. So we sometimes create panic with generic number, loss of 30 tigers. I mean, they would die. I mean, if you have 3,000 plus tigers, some of them would die. But also the interesting part is that they're cats, and you know that they breed. So given an opportunity, 50 tigers a year, I'm putting it hypothetically, if 50 tigers a year is poached, that should not cause a very big damage. But the numbers never stay limited. If the poachers have their way, and if the syndicates operate, and any business survives on growth, they have to grow, they have to hunt more, poach more. So that is the risk, but borderline poaching will always remain, and that is not that big a threat. But now what we are seeing in the last few years, this has assumed proportion that is a real cause for alarm, and they're operating across the country. I mean, earlier it happened that they have targeted a certain part, like 2013, the main damage was done in the central India. During Sariska's time, it was central and northern. But this time they're operating everywhere, and they're switching location. And you would imagine that the tribal poachers, we tend to think of them as quote-unquote primitive. And they all belong to two big pockets. One in the north, Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, there is a belt. And then some in the center. Madhya Pradesh, Katni is one big hub of the Pardis. Now, some Bavarias from the north, they were found in poaching in Tamil Nadu, in Satyamangalam. who are talking Tamil. Now, I doubt if you and me go somewhere and settle down for a year and start speaking Tamil without any training. Then in 2013, when the big racket happened, so they made some arrests and they got a number in Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra area. So that phone number that they could not trace further, but it was in that database. So after 3 years, there was a bust in North Bihar and the Nepal border. So there was an old man in his 60s. So his phone gave out the same number. So for people who are seemingly not very educated, not very organized, they are amazingly flexible. They switch flanks of operation. Now in Maharashtra, in 2 years, they're there in Bihar. Who knows, how smoothly it works. And much of this is not known, unfortunately. And the agencies, they don't coordinate much.
And you earlier mentioned numbers regarding, how much a tiger can fetch. How hard is it for authorities to track their finances?
It will be tough because the way they have organized it now, earlier it was mostly on cash because the numbers were fewer and also the contract value, like I said, below 1 lakh, just about 1 lakh per tiger. So that would be mostly in cash. But now when it has gone up to 8 to 12 lakhs and they're smart enough to open accounts in the name of all family members, and then they break down the amount and they don't take payment. Each digital payment would be below 3 lakhs. I don't know why 3 lakhs. There could be some kind of a automated alert system that, but even so, these people stay in shanties in the fringe forest areas, and if they have accounts which have transactions totaling to several lakhs, like 20, 30, 50, this should show up. And they have also invested in land, which they are now figuring out, the agencies, that they have also bought significant tracts of land in MP.
And one thing that was, concerning was that, 2 key leaders of a poaching syndicate were arrested by officials in 2023. But then a little while after that, they got bail and then they again began poaching.
Yeah, so the only way this can be tracked, if you have very good field intelligence, tracking phones will never be enough because nobody uses normal calls anymore. They are now smart enough to use WhatsApp and other apps. And the Wildlife Act is very clear. You have to catch somebody in possession. So just catching a poacher or a trader without the contraband means nothing.
Also, even though you might have some details about their finances or some other proof, unless you catch them red-handed, it doesn't work.
You have to catch them with contraband, and sometimes, again, let not take names, depending on their experience and expertise, agencies, some groups, they lose nerve. You have to wait, basically. So the way to work this investigation is that you have some intel agencies, that somebody is somewhere where he shouldn't be, some outsider, inside forest, must be poaching. You can go nab him. It will mean nothing. You will have to wait, and you have to wait for further intel when he has a stockpile. At least something has to be there. And there also sometimes the agencies don't wait. They go and nab them, which leads to nothing. And also secondly, what kind of contraband they have. Like these guys are compulsive poachers in the sense that they keep poaching this and this and that. So at most times, if you go to their hutment and do a search, you will find something, some porcupine quill, some meat of some bush meat. But that won't give you the punishment if you're talking about a tiger poacher. So the trick is to get them in possession of tiger parts.
Also, unlike previous times when you had a lot of skin being transported, but now with the bone powder...
No, they are not powdering here. They are not powdering here because that would need some...
Expertise?
Expertise plus infrastructure. Indian expertise, Indian poachers, not all poachers, but in each gang they have at least one. They're master skinners. They will skin a tiger so well and so fast. And also in North India, we have a tradition of the expert tanners. So they can, if they have time, they can skin so well and tan so well that a big 9-10 feet tiger skin can be folded and put in your suitcase with clothes and no scanner will catch it. They tan it so well. Not all of them, but that's our expertise. But the crushing and bone glue and all that happens across the borders.
Right, and we've been talking about what forest officials and agencies are up against. But talk about the challenges these agencies face internally. Because you mentioned in your report that, there are not that many people working on this. And also that there's such little coordination.
Yeah, the first thing is coordination because we have a central agency, WCCB, Wildlife Crime Control Bureau. They have a total strength of some 100, of which about 25% is vacant. But even otherwise, they have this actual, you have two kinds of staff in these agencies, administrative and those who are the field staff. So you need some constables, you need some regular inspectors who would go and raid and make arrests. But actual that strength that makes a difference is those who know the ways of the forest, ways of the poachers, who can get to intel. So all of that is left to 8 individuals, 8 or 6 now for the entire country.
6 individuals for the entire country?
Yeah, 6. So that can't work, first of all. And secondly, now the government has a mandate that, for example, each tiger reserve will have a TTF, Tiger Task Force. That's mainly for protection. So part of that, they also have a intelligence gathering facility, but it is not standardized. It always depends on the officer involved. If you have a good officer in charge, he would gather better intel. If he goes, because it's all transferable jobs, then things go down. And thirdly, these TTFs do not coordinate. As I mentioned before, that very old guy, a very old poacher was shuffling across India from North Bihar to Maharashtra. But it seldom happens that Maharashtra, Tiger Reserves of Maharashtra, the Maharashtra Department, or any state would be talking regularly to the other states, because poachers don't follow boundaries. The enforcement often does. So that's one problem. No coordination, and manpower, of course, is an issue.
Yeah, and the other alarming thing is that the WCCB since 2020, it doesn't even have a chief.
No, it doesn't have a chief. They put officers in charge, and it also shows that how serious the government is, because the moment you put an officer in charge who is not the full-time chief, you are also sending a message that your mandate is only this far. I mean, had we wanted more, we would have done more. So that's how it's working. And because then, without a very strong, effective WCCB, it is left to the states. And there, it's a very strange mix. There are states like Madhya Pradesh, Kerala, Maharashtra, of course, and other southern states as well. Karnataka is good. They have a proper mechanism in place. They keep their intels sorted, and they know how to deal with these issues. And there is also a degree of expertise on the other side of the spectrum. If you go to, let's not name states, it's almost, there is nothing. So it's kind of a field day. And in most cases, you will see, it's very interesting that when these kind of arrests are made, they are made by certain state forest departments and WCCB sometimes. They travel to another state with a lead, and then they make those arrests. Like in this case also, they have gone to the northeast and then. But because this new channel through Myanmar, they all have a history, because not all of them got into a tiger trade overnight. They were there, they have a history with the rhino horn. They have a history with pangolin. So it can help a lot if they coordinate, look at the old local case files, and then try to crack it. But that's not happening at the scale it should have happened.
Right, and the lack of coordination and the lack of manpower are big red flags. But the other big surprising part in your report was that the WCCB on its website, it continues to publish a catalogue of convicted poachers, many of them with addresses, and which apparently serves as a guide for people who want to scout for poachers.
That I mentioned because that was a viewpoint put across by an officer from another agency, another central agency. It can be damaging if you have a new player who is entering this trade, a new scouter. Normally, these are very well knit, so they would know where to go, what to look for. But suppose if somebody is interested, suppose you want to access some tiger bones, so otherwise you would have a clue. But now you have a list, and many of them with addresses. So it gives you an opportunity to go and figure out that who is where. And the WCCB's retort is fine that, this is a very close-knit community and they don't need our network. But that's also strange because we all know, those have worked on this issue, that we are talking about a population of 100, maybe 150. It's not beyond that. This is the population that is doing the actual core poaching and the trade and running the trade. And probably 150 in all, and probably 20 families. And they have been doing this for generations. And so it cannot be that difficult to keep track of them. I don't think so. It is very much possible if you want. And they may make new connections. Sometimes you have local hunters who are not into this kind of serious hunting. They do some subsistence hunting. So they tie up with them. They also join. But because the nucleus is so limited, if we're talking about 20 odd families of 150 people, it is very much possible to keep track of them.
And in the beginning, we were talking about how people can get complacent. And this also happened to a lot of NGOs this time. So I was wondering, what role do NGOs play in all of this?
very specific and specialized role. In India, there are frankly 2-3 NGOs, maybe 4, who have done some real work. Many NGOs keep track of trafficking, some anti-trafficking database and all. But all this thing, when this poaching became a big known threat, and so Mr. Ashok Kumar, with Belinda Rights, they set up one NGO because the government enforcement system was not very strong that time. And they used to plant informers. They used to go and talk to ex-poachers, try to convince them to become their informers and get leads, and then go to the police with the leads. Pretty much what the WCCB should or does right now. So subsequently they split, and now we have 2 NGOs who are doing that. And plus in Rajasthan, there is another NGO, Tiger Watch, who has a very good model, which is not always encouraged, is that they are using, they call it village volunteers. So you have people from the community on your payroll, paying them some incentive to become your informer and look after your tigers and to alert you if there are new people moving in, if there is some suspicious activity. So NGOs can play a role, but sometimes the government is not very happy with them because they tell you uncomfortable truth. So that's also the problem.
And so what do you think is the way ahead? Do you assign more forest officials? Do you assign more experienced people to the WCCB? Or do you change laws, when you're not necessarily required to catch people red-handed? What do experts you spoke to say is the way forward?
So experts have very contrasting views. There is one view is that we need to strengthen the law. But the unfortunate part is that if you have a more stringent law, and because it is the tribal poacher most of the time, that law can be misused. It is still misused, and many tribal families who do not have anything to do with poaching, they suffer. Even now, with this investigation going on, in one state they issued a blanket order that they can go and search and raid any tribal family in some forest areas, which is, to my understanding, extra legal. So strengthening the law is not necessary, because unless your enforcement is correct, however strength your law is, it won't help. So I think coordination is the first requirement. And the second point is that it's not important how many people you put on the job. You have to find people who know the job. They understand the forest, they understand the tribal ways, not the tribal ways, the tribal poachers' ways, and they are specialized. So to crack a specialized crime, you need a specialized enforcement system.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargava, and was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.